necessarily do the formal introductions until people start getting here anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is really cool to be with Representative Glenn Cordelli. Glenn, did we first meet at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum?
I believe so. Yes. Yeah.
So that must have been 2018,
Yeah.
3 years ago.
I believe it was that debate we had.
Killed the debate. The other
Yeah,
side
I
couldn't
think.
handle us. We were on the same side. It was game over.
Yeah.
For listeners, this was a debate that Representative Glenn Cordelli and I had with a couple of other libertarians who were arguing. We're essentially making perfect the enemy of the good, and we were making the argument that, look, ESAs aren't perfect, but it's a step in the right direction towards more freedom and liberty, because the alternative is that all of the money automatically goes to government-run institutions instead of families. Essentially having food stamps for everybody, but then forcing people to spend those food stamps at the government-run grocery store, allowing people to choose to take those dollars elsewhere is a libertarian move. So I think we made the compelling argument for ESAs a couple of years ago. So,
It wasn't a fair debate.
okay. Now, yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Okay, we got a good amount of people on right now. So I guess we'll kick it off. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Educational Freedom Institute podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Corey DeAngelis at the Reason Foundation. And we also have a co-host, obviously, the founder of the Educational Freedom Institute, Matthew Nielsen. We have an amazing guest today that I've known for years now, which we were just talking about. We first met in person as part of a debate where we really destroyed the anti-school choice debaters on the other side. But this is Representative Glenn Cordelli from New Hampshire, and he's a staunch advocate of school choice. He's one of the current sponsors on a bill in New Hampshire, House Bill 20, to establish what they're calling education freedom accounts, not even education savings accounts. We're calling them education freedom accounts because this is the live free or die state of New Hampshire, but it's the same concept. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I want to point out really quickly that we called them education freedom accounts, but when this bill first dropped, you had a lot of the education establishment really screeching about it, saying that this was the quote unquote scariest school choice bill in the nation, and they were engaging in a lot of fear mongering. So Glenn, could you give us a little bit of background on, one, why school choice is so important to you, and then two, just a little bit of the details on the bill and maybe why there was so much fear mongering happening in with this particular bill?
Sure. I think that I became interested years ago with my youngest daughter when she came home from school crying. My teachers making me lie to the students, telling them that I'm succeeding, and she was having a tough time. So I got involved in education back then, and I just think that even a great school is not the best fit for every child, and especially in the live free or die state, freedom, is basic to core to us in New Hampshire. So this is really the series of bills that we've tried. I've been working on this for 5 years, and this bill is probably the most universal in the nation, in that any child who is eligible to attend a public school in New Hampshire can get an EFA account. So if you're in a public school, a homeschooler.
What is an EFA account?
I'm sorry, Education Freedom Account.
And so is this, I have like some money that I put aside out of my paycheck goes into an EFA account, and then I use it for private school for my own kid, or is it different where it comes through the state education budget?
Right. We have state adequacy grants that go to the school to educate each child now. Those state adequacy grant funds, if you sign up for one of these accounts, the state money would go into the account for you to use to provide from a range of services to provide the best education for your child. In New Hampshire, that base adequacy amount, or I guess the average amount would be about $4,600. The rest is all local money. So the majority of the money is on the local side. But the $4,600 is a good amount for a lot of people, especially when you consider that the average private school K through 8 in New Hampshire is about $8,500. So it opens up a lot of doors for families. And there is an agreement that would have to be signed, and agreement to educate your child in the core subjects, and to use only the money for allowable expenses.
So
but it's wide-ranging.
So I have a nice restaurant next door to my place. I couldn't take the EFA account because it's freedom accounts, right? It's my freedom. I should be able to take it to the restaurant, right? Would I be able to do that?
That's not an allowable expense in the list, but tuition, and you can also use it to go to an out-of-district public school. So it's true education freedom in that regard.
So that's interesting. Tell us more about that, Glenn. If I live in a low-performing school district, I'm zoned. My second grader is zoned for the absolute worst elementary school in the state, whatever that is, and I wish I knew that so I could say what town it's in, but I don't know that. So I'm zoned for that. I can take an EFA account and say, because what that does, it sounds like what that does is it creates, and I don't know if you have this already in New Hampshire, you can tell us, do you already have inter and intra-district choice, or will this effectively create it?
This effectively creates it. The only really inter-district choice we have is if you don't have grade levels, K through 4, for instance, you would contract with a local district to provide the education for those children. But this will create more public school choice as well. You could go to that neighboring district and say, here's my base adequacy amount. Let's negotiate a price for my student, and I'd like to enroll them there.
Wow, that's cool. That's really interesting, actually.
So the eligibility for this program, it's everyone that has a school-age child living in this, as long as you're eligible to attend a public school in New Hampshire, would be able to use the program? That's
correct. Homeschool children would qualify, as well as child going to a private school, because if they're eligible to attend a public school, they qualify. So it is pretty much a truly universal education savings account bill.
So I should have taken a screenshot of this, but do you remember this exchange on Twitter? Okay, so this education historian went through a thread of all the bills. I think they got it from the Educational Freedom Institute website. Where else did they know where all these bills came from?
Probably.
But they said, look, this one is the scariest of them all. New Hampshire House Bill 20. It's so scary because everybody can use it, and it's an education savings account. So what does that tell you about this bill, Glenn? Should we be afraid of it? Is something being scary to the education establishment a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing, and they should be scared. Look at what's happening around the country. I think, as you both have indicated previously, the pandemic and the remote learning has opened really a window for parents into what's going on with their children's education. And some are just anxious to get back to their public schools, whereas others are saying, wait a minute, I don't like what's going on. There's got to be a better way for my child. And I think there's a growing hunger for that education freedom out there across the nation.
What's cool about this this proposal, and we should probably talk about where it's at. I mean, we talked about this before we started, but yeah, we should get into that. But what's cool about this system that this bill proposes is that it gives everyone the opportunity to do whatever they want. So it really is the live free, right? It's the live free part, not the die part.
Yeah, we're trying to break down the zip code barriers, those walls around school districts. They talk about public schools having to accept every child, and they can't discriminate, but it's a lie. We know it's a lie. There's wealth discrimination, there's zip code discrimination, there's all kinds of discrimination in trying to go to public school. We've seen cases around the country where parents have been sentenced to jail for using their parents' address for trying to get a better education for their child. And that can't be America.
Yep. Right.
I just shared the tweet, if anybody wants to go check it out, of the education historian calling this bill the scariest of them all, which people on my timeline, I think that's actually a good thing. That's an honor for New Hampshire to be the scariest.
We'll wear it as a badge.
Bill.
That's right.
Bill of them all. Where is the bill in the process right now? And if there are any holdups, what is the source of any holdups? It seems like this is an excellent idea. Look, it's you get about a third of the funding that would have went to the public school. The public school gets to keep a lot of it. The families get to choose; they don't have to take the money.
Right.
And it seems like a win-win scenario. But where's it at, and what pushback have you seen, if any?
Mm-hmm. With this environment that we're in, public testimony is remote these days in New Hampshire. So it's really opened the door to many, many people who want to testify. So we scheduled the first hearing 2 weeks ago and had something like 150 people sign up to testify. So we had to schedule a second day, full day of testimony. And it was very interesting. On one side, you have the lobbyists and the education establishment. And on the other side, you had parents, some of whom were crying, talking about their desire for these accounts. It was really fascinating. So we had 2 days of hearings. Yesterday, we were scheduled to exec or to vote on the bill in committee. For various reasons, including a drafting error and some reluctant Republicans, we voted to retain the bill in our education committee. So
what does that do?
we have to fight another day, basically.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a good question. What does that do, Glenn? If you retain it in committee, then what?
We can work on it and bring it back next year. We retained another similar bill that had come before us that was almost or even more broad, in that the town could vote to have the local money go with the child as well as the state money. So truly a money follows the child legislation. So we have both those bills in our back pocket. And in the meantime, there was a Senate bill. When we first filed the legislation, we filed a duplicate of our Education Freedom Account bill over in the Senate. And they've sort of been waiting to see what happened with our bill. So they now have a hearing scheduled on March 2nd in the Senate Education Committee on their bill.
And is it exactly the same? Are there any differences in eligibility or dollar amount? Nope.
It was exactly the same as the original bill. There might be a couple of little tweaks. For instance, one tweak we had to make was to make clear that an EFA student, an Education Freedom Account student, is not the same as a homeschool student. They're different categories. So we want to make that clear. We'll probably do the same thing over in the Senate side.
So this is good, even though it's being retained by the House Education Committee, which really means effectively, as you say, it's next year. That's best case, it sounds like, for the House version. But there's a Senate version that could make its way through still this year, which is great news.
And one advantage there is we have a very large House of Representatives in New Hampshire. We have 400 members. So, it's often said that it's like herding cats. Even within our own party, to be honest. So it's difficult to get things done, and we found that out in our own committee this year. But in the Senate, we have a very small Senate, only 24 members, and 14 of them are Republican in this term. So I think it's a lot easier to get consensus and to get agreement and to get something done in many cases over on the Senate side. And I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to get their bill through the Senate.
That's great.
What do you think, if you had to guess, what the vote would be in the Senate?
The Education Committee has 5 members. I think it'll be a 3-2 vote along party lines, and I think it would probably be the same in the full Senate vote.
A full straight party line vote?
I believe so, yeah.
So in the House, there's also a Republican majority, as you guys have in the Senate. Now it's not true. It's true that sometimes a Democrat will cross the line and vote for school choice, but typically, what I've seen this year in particular is every single Democrat has been voting against school choice policies at the state level. If you have a majority in the House, what's kind of the holdup with some of the Republicans as it pertains to EFAs?
I think one of the concerns, and the unions have been doing a good job of getting their message out, as they always do, in terms of, let's say, as was mentioned earlier, the scare tactics, and saying that it's going to be a loss of money for the local school district, and they're going to have to raise property taxes. Because as we know, when enrollment declines, all costs are fixed, right? Yeah. So it's interesting.
They only lose $4,600 if they spend like $20,000 per year. That's a great deal. That's a great deal for the public schools.
That's right. And one district I looked up, over the past 20 years, their enrollment has declined by over 30%, but their budget's gone up by over 50%, which is not too unusual, probably in many places across the country, but it's the usual type of tactics. And it's interesting, we went back and looked at quotes from the opposition, both when we implemented a tax credit scholarship program and when we started charter schools. And it's the same arguments, the same tired arguments over and over again, none of which have panned out to be true. But it's a scare tactics because they are scared.
Why are they so scared if their public schools are doing a good job and you don't need choice? That's
exactly right. That's one of the arguments we've made. We have the Democrats patting themselves on the back that we're in the top 5 school rankings in the nation, right? So, if our schools are so good, there could be, 1 or 2 kids maybe looking to leave. What's there to be scared of? But, they're scared of any change. We had a bill last term that I put in to allow districts to get waivers from administrative rules. Give public schools more freedom to innovate, right? That bill was defeated by the Democrat majority. And the reasoning was, it's an insult to public schools because we already innovate. So allowing them to get waivers is an insult. So, trying to figure out that.
You're trying to cut some red tape in the public schools to give them more flexibility,
Yep.
more competitive, and they voted against.
Yes.
That.
They asked for this. So you guys.
Well, if that passes, they can't say you're anti-public school.
Right.
He's helping. You're actually pro-public school. We're helping the public schools compete.
That's right.
You've heard this argument before. I know you have because I've heard it a million times. That, well, if you're going to do all of this for charter schools, if you're going to give them the flexibility to innovate, if you're going to give them the flexibility to do this and that, if you're going to give them the flexibility, fill in the blank, to do fill in the blank, then public schools, district schools should get that same flexibility, and we should be allowed to have. And so then you go and you offer it.
Right.
You say, no. We didn't mean that. Actually, never mind.
I think that shows how scared they are. Any crack in the armor, might unlock that door to the public schoolhouse to let their families out and into a better education environment. They're afraid to open that crack in the door.
Glenn, I've heard a similar this argument in other states. You can tell me if it's floating around in New Hampshire, but people are saying in other places, since it's only the state portion of the funding, in New Hampshire it's about $4,600, whereas they spend $20,000 in the public schools.
Right.
They'll say, well, we shouldn't support this because it doesn't cover the full cost of private school tuition. What is your initial response to those types of arguments?
It probably won't, but in New Hampshire, many of those private schools also will give you scholarships on top of that EFA account. That's the same thing that happens with our tax credit scholarship program, where the average grant is about $2,500. So this private schools will give you a scholarship on top of that. Plus, the parents will have some contribution to make. They'll have skin in the game as well. So it's a step up. It's not going to cover the full cost of tuition, but it'll be a help for those parents who need it.
Yeah, some assistance is better than none, and they wouldn't oppose Pell Grants just because they don't cover the full cost of attending Harvard.
Right.
Could you combine those, the two programs?
You can.
Could you say, I want to use the EFA because I'm automatically eligible, and I've found some organizations that want to help, tax credit scholarship. I want to combine those two and use them together for a private school or to attend my neighboring district or whatever.
Yes, you can combine them. So we currently have about 600 plus students in our tax credit scholarship program.
So what's interesting to me about this argument is those same people, if you ask them if they would support giving people more of their education dollars, they'll say no way. Well, how about we make the average amount $6,000, $7,000, $8,000? No, they definitely don't want that either, because then they'll just pivot to you're taking more money out of the public schools. So that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The public schools need more money if they're going to improve the proficiency rates and outcomes for children. They need more money. That's been the case.
We spend $20,000. We need $50,000.
50,
right.
triple it.
And we might get the same results, and we'll just explain it at that point when we get the same results, and then we'll say, well, we're almost there.
Right.
It ought to be $60,000, not $50,000.
Right. And maybe we should ask them when they want that $50,000, what's going to be the return on investment? What's the ROI?
Well, the ROI is
you can't measure it, Glenn. The truth is, you just can't.
It's unmeasurable. Our success is unmeasurable.
Right.
That's right.
We're doing all these things that you just can't see.
Any attempt to put tangible metrics will fail. It's just, you can't do it. It's impossible.
I wanted to mention one thing about the scare tactics and the reason that the education establishment unions are scared. Last year, we got a $46 million grant from the federal government to expand charter schools in New Hampshire.
Yep. And what happened with that?
That was blocked by our Democrat-led fiscal committee for 6 months without real explanation as to why. Except one Democrat state senator told one of my colleagues that the grant's not going to go through until all the jobs are union jobs.
Oof, they have
So,
to be starters.
a moment of truth.
He said it out loud.
But we have now that we have a Republican majority, the first action of our fiscal committee was to accept the grant.
That's awesome.
Well, what I thought was funny is, weren't people saying like, "Oh, this is going to take money from the traditional public schools," even though it was extra money sitting there, going to start up charters, and that's somehow stealing money from the traditional schools.
Right, and charter schools are public schools, so you can't make this stuff up.
Oh, look, Glenn, if you're a union leader, charter schools are only public schools if you're trying to make the argument that 90% of kids are in public schools, because then you inflate your numbers. Randy Weingarten does this, the American Federation for Teachers president. She'll call charters private when she tries to say that they're bad.
Right.
But then when she's trying to boost her numbers of amount of kids in the public system, she counts the kids in charters as public school students.
Right.
Which is,
speaking of union leaders, let me mention a crazy thing about our education committee in the House. We have one member who I think you're familiar with, Corey, who is a former NEA national official, who maybe made your hypocrisy map, I think.
yeah.
And that one of his children has gone to a private school, but he opposes education freedom accounts.
Oh, a recent addition.
It's on the map. I'm gonna pull it up. Might as well pull it up.
The one we just added last week?
You probably added it, not me. Let's see. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen. Most people on here have heard of the school choice hypocrisy map, but the main idea here is people who sent their own kids to private school and benefited from having school choice, but then fight tooth and nail against extending that opportunity to less advantaged families. So if we have this thing called the school choice hypocrisy map, I think the first person on the map was Elizabeth Warren, because she lied about sending her kid to private school. And then I found it out on Ancestry.com that Alex Warren went to a couple of private schools. But in New Hampshire, the first person on the map is Representative Mel Myler. Yes, there we go. There may be some others in New Hampshire. If you want to send them in to Matthew or myself, go ahead. You can send it into Matthew. His email is matthew@efinstitute.org if you want to add someone to the map. And we're more than happy to take people off the map as well if they just stop being school choice hypocrites.
I want to mention one other union official on our education committee. He is the current president of AFT New Hampshire. His NEA counterpart is a registered lobbyist. But here is the president of AFT New Hampshire sitting on the education committee voting on this legislation.
Is that okay in New Hampshire?
Evidently, I went to the ethics committee 3 times last year when he was the Democrat majority leader. And I have a feeling I'll be going to them again very soon.
Because there's conflict of interest type of policies in New Hampshire.
Right. Yeah. But as long as you declare you have a conflict of interest, then go right ahead.
Oh, then it's okay. As long as people know about it. So here, we were talking a little bit about the fear mongering here. I pulled up the tweet because I wasn't happy with just putting my phone on the screen. Here's the education historian. I think he wrote a book against school choice as well. And I'm not going to promote it, but you can go look for it if you want. It's on the thread if you really want to look for it. But House Bill 20 in New Hampshire, the scariest of them all. While we're looking at Twitter feeds, though, and talking about teachers' unions, I think one of the funniest tweets that I saw in the past year maybe came from the New Hampshire teachers union, and here it is. Public schools are fiscally responsible and spend their money more wisely than private schools because all spending decisions happen to be in public view. What are your thoughts on that, Glenn? I quote tweeted this and said, this is not a teachers union parody account because you would initially probably think that this was a joke.
Yeah. I think you can go to many citizens who have attended public school local board meetings and have been quieted, shall we say, who have been dismissed. We have a large ongoing problem in Nashua, New Hampshire, where they're just finally starting to allow children back into the classrooms. But parents were up in arms and were really shut out by the local school board. So it's an ongoing effort with local school boards. Unfortunately, a lot of school boards think that they report to the superintendent rather than the other way around.
Oof. They should report to the families. The kids are the consumers of the educational services. That should be the number one priority. So you've been on school choice bills before. I think you said 2017 at the beginning of this call, and over the years.
Right.
How does the kind of momentum behind school choice this year feel compared to other years? Is it the same? Are people just as excited about it this year? Less excited about it? Do you feel like there's more momentum?
Good question.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on how people have been kind of receiving this?
I think there is definitely more momentum this year because of that window into education that parents have had. I think it's hopefully not just a window, but a double door. So, we'll see. But, we have a large turnover in the New Hampshire House. So we have, out of 400 members, we probably have 100 new members. Mm-hmm. So it's also an education to them. But I'm very happy with the reaction we've gotten from the new members as well. And we have a very supportive governor as well, who has always backed school choice. Actually, if I could take a second and just read you a quote from him in relation to the current bill. He said, you can sum all this up with it's got to be about outcomes for kids, not outcomes for the system. We have great public schools here, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4% of the population where it's not ideal, and giving them the opportunity is huge.
Yeah, I think that's from great. December, right? And he was talking about this bill. It's got to be about the outcomes for the kids, not the system. Boom. Right. Fund students, not systems. That's
right.
He's adopting the language.
Geez, wouldn't that make a nice mask? Face mask.
Oh! I had a picture that I sent to Matthew the other day of this kind fellow Representative Glenn Cordelli at a meeting, a hearing, and he had a nice mask which said "Fund Students."
I wonder where we got it.
I got a good screenshot of you during that hearing the other day. It was just Wednesday, wasn't it? That was 2 days ago. But yeah, I blew it up and sent it to Matthew. If I had it, I'd put it onto the screen right now, but I haven't uploaded it yet.
Yes, that's cool.
You could do me a favor and just airbrush some hair onto it. It would be great.
Onto the picture, the screenshot.
I might have sent you the picture too, Glenn, but maybe not.
I think so.
So,
hey, we got a question. Well, go ahead, Corey. I was just going to say we got a question in the comments here. That's a good question, and it was a little bit ago. Let me just pull it up here.
From Alan?
Yep, right here. So, are any considerations being given to dealing with districts that are abandoned to the point they're no longer economically viable? So,
if everybody leaves the school, what are you going to do with the school, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. So, I'll just say, throw out there, I don't know if that's actually even a realistic problem, because honestly, I believe that most families are going to just choose what's convenient. It's down the street. My kids have always gone there. That's where they're going to go. Realistic or not, though, it's an interesting question, and it's something that maybe for a school here or a school there could actually happen. There's that potential. Have you given any thought to that, Glenn, or have you had any conversations with your colleagues in the House about that?
Yeah, it's been raised as another scare tactic in terms of all 16,000 private school students wanting to take an EFA account that's going to cost $80 million to the state. That kind of really outlandish proposal. So we know, based on participation rates across the country, that nothing like that is going to happen. But I have heard talk, if we have a lot of little towns who are their own district in effect, and they maybe have a school with grades 1 through 4 and then send their kids elsewhere for the other grade levels. Would it be sensible to let them each take an EFA account for grades 1 through 4 and not have the responsibility of the school building and all those expenses? Is it really an economically feasible and educationally wise alternative? Maybe so. Something that could be looked at in the future.
Yeah, we've never seen a public school close because of a mass exodus from a private school choice program. It's just never happened. It's fear mongering. But I mean, if we really want to think about it in the long run, in reply to Alan, I think it is certainly possible. But there are public schools that close even without school choice programs in existence. Yeah. I don't think it's a school choice issue per se, and it's not something that only happens if school choice is around. And charter schools close as well. And that's not a problem per se. It's actually a good thing if something that is failing closes over time.
That's
Maybe
right.
we don't want it to happen right away, but if it's failing for decades, the market is correcting that failure. They either got to shape up or shut down, and that's just part of the deal.
So you bring up an interesting point, though, Corey. We've heard this. In fact, one of our guests, close to a year ago, that's as I recall it anyway, and I can't remember exactly who it was, but we had this conversation about occupancy rates in schools.
Yep.
And do you remember this?
This was a Talkbeat article by Matt Barnum, and I'm going to pull it up. Chicago public schools, right? Or Detroit?
Yeah, it might have been Detroit. Yeah, I could be wrong. I think it's Detroit, though. But yeah, so occupancy rates. Now, we see this across the country where there are schools that have 50 kids in them, and they have a capacity of 750, but they remain open. Oh, you know what I'm thinking of, actually, I think is Oklahoma, Corey. There was a school in Oklahoma. Anyway, it's beside the point. The point is that there are schools across the country that remain open at like a fraction of their enrollment capacity, where they're educating 50 to 75 kids. And that was it. It was an argument over a charter school coming in and operating a district school in Oklahoma. And the folks in that town in Oklahoma didn't want them coming in because they said, no, we're doing it just fine. It's you're tearing public schools apart. How could you do this? And that same school district was operating schools like this, where they had just a fraction of these kids in their schools. Anyway,
I think the Detroit school that was written about like a year or two ago it had like a 3% of the 3% of the occupancy of students. Wow. In reality, it's like mostly empty schools, staying open for years, and then they close, and then everybody freaks out. But it's like they only had like 3% of what it was built for actually there.
Here's Alan coming back. Alan lives in Detroit or in Michigan somewhere, I think. Yeah, 7 high schools in Detroit several years ago. That's amazing. That less than 25% occupancy. So anyway, to that point, you said schools close down or they could close down. Well, not always. That doesn't always happen.
Glenn, how did the school reopening kind of debate unfold in New Hampshire? I've been watching it nationally, obviously, and it seems like there's been a bunch of unions, and they're still pushing in some places to keep the schools closed. Is that still happening in New Hampshire, or to what extent did that happen over the past year? What was your experience?
It varied widely. I think like many places, we saw most of the private schools open while there were still a lot of public schools closed. And I think that's probably nationally, but there was a wide variety. But I think it was 2 days ago, our governor put forward an executive order mandating that every public school had to be open at least 2 days a week for in-classroom instruction. So we'll see how that gets the ball rolling. We've had the union leaders saying, well, teachers have to get vaccinated before, we reopen the schools and, things like that. But
what if the teachers choose not to get vaccinated?
Yeah.
We'll require teachers to get vaccinated open, then we'll say, okay, well, we don't want to get vaccinated, and now the schools aren't open. I mean, the CDC director, even the new CDC director recently said that the teachers don't have to be vaccinated. And Jake Tapper, even from CNN, has pushed back on her a bunch of times and made her kind of fumble a little bit because, look, you said they don't need to be vaccinated. And I think Tapper was pushing back on using the community transmission rates as a prerequisite for opening the schools, when the CDC themselves has said multiple times that the transmission in the school isn't what's leading to the community transmission, and that they're not particularly linked. So you guys have teachers unions. Are they sending you guys emails about, or have they been sending you guys emails about anything in particular with reopening the schools and urging you to do one thing or another?
Not to us as about reopening the schools, as just around this Education Freedom account. That's where we've been getting the emails and the pushback. But that's to be expected. And
it's the usual arguments.
Yeah, right. And I think with the Education Freedom Account bill, we had 1,000 people sign up in support of it, which we thought was pretty good. But we had 5,000 people sign up in opposition because, we know the unions can turn out their supporters. So we actually thought that the 1,000 in support was pretty good from a grassroots effort.
Well, you can get all of your employees to go and testify against something. It's a concentrated interest and dispersed cost issue front and center that everybody can learn from.
Right. Yeah.
Concentrated issues, dispersed costs.
Yes. Yeah. That explains a lot of what we see with politics in the United States and in other countries as well. So, Glenn, what is your main takeaway you want people to kind of get from this conversation about education freedom accounts or school choice in general, or anything?
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a ancient Greek philosopher who said that the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. And my viewpoint is that in New Hampshire, we're going to strike that spark. We're going to take some bellows and fan the flames of education freedom across this country. Thomas Paine said, "The moment is upon us. in his book, The Common Sense. And I think that the time is upon us. The time is right, and it's something that parents want, and the momentum is building, as we talked about earlier. And it's just a matter of time before we have greater education for all parents across the country.
Excellent. The time is now. And what do you think? What should parents do, or just anybody who either wants to know more about this or to kind of help spread the word? What should people do?
About our bill in particular, or our efforts, or nationally, talk to your school board members, talk to other parents. As our former governor used to say, talk. Parents can make a difference. Grassroots efforts can make a difference. Here in New Hampshire, we have a website, educationfreedomnh.org, that explains a little bit about our program, and also allows people to reach out and communicate with their House members and their senators. And it's a great model for other efforts in the state to do something like that as well, because it starts with parents talking to their legislators and to their school board members locally.
Cool. I just added that to the commentary, so everybody go check out that Education Freedom New Hampshire, or nh.org.
Right.
We've got some really cool stuff going on. This is a really innovative approach, the EFA, that effectively creates interdistrict choice. We've got Senator Manny Diaz that we just talked with a few days back in Florida, that's doing some really innovative stuff with school choice, where they're consolidating programs and making them easier for families to use. It's no accident that people are calling it, and it's not inaccurate to say that this year could be the year of school choice. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on around the different states, and we appreciate your work, Representative Cordelli, up there in New Hampshire. This is great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for efforts that you both are involved in. It surely is making a difference.
Thank you so much, Representative Cordelli, and thank you for giving us your time today and expertise when it comes to school choice, particularly in New Hampshire. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Educational Freedom Institute podcast. Once again, this was our special guest of the week, Representative Glenn Cordelli from New Hampshire. I recommend going and checking out a bill that he's a sponsor of over there, House Bill 20, which would establish education freedom accounts in New Hampshire, which the establishment has deemed the scariest school choice proposal in the nation. And I would chalk that up as a win. Thank you so much, everybody. See you guys next week.